So welcome everybody, and welcome to this new mini podcast titled Three Voices by us in Leeds Community Healthcare NHS Trust. I'd like to start with some introductions. First of all, my name is Colvin Sandhu. In my day job, I work as the name nurse for Mental Capacity Act and Dementia here at Leeds Community Healthcare NHS Trust. And I'm also chair of our Black, Asian and Minority Ethnic Staff Network here in our organisation. I am joined by two people who are going to have some discussions with me during our mini podcast today. I'm joined by Beverly Powell, who's Senior Advisor to Jacqueline Davis, Director of Leadership and Lifelong Learning at NHS Leadership Academy. Beverly, do you want to come on and say a bit about your role?
Yeah, thanks, Colvin. Thank you very much for inviting me into this podcast to be involved in this. So my role is supporting Jacqueline Davis in the NHSI and NHSE improvement space around her commitments under the people plan. So around that is around how we support our people, talent, lifelong learning and leadership. And so that has always been my passion, and also my work as a transformational leadership coach in moving people forward and progressing and helping them achieve their goals. So in a way, acting as a professional advocate in so many ways. So I'm delighted to be part of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Beverly. It's lovely to have you, and thanks for joining us today. And our third person that's in this podcast with us is John Walsh. John Walsh is our organisation development lead and also our Freedom Speak Up Guardian here at Leeds Community Healthcare NHS Trust. John, do you want to come on and say a few words as well, just about your role?
Yeah, thank you, Colvan. And it's great to join Colvan and Beverly today. I'm John Walsh. I've worked in the NHS for 25 years, which seems to have gone really quickly. Most of that time, 22 years, I worked with homeless people and people in the asylum system. About two-thirds of that time, I worked on the streets with people who were homeless. And the last period, I was a manager in the service. And these days, I'm still at Leeds Community Healthcare, working in organisational development. And I'm also the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian to Healthcare, and also for Leeds GP Confederation.
That's great. Thank you, John. And just to add for myself as chair of our BAME staff network, we are a staff network that have been now formed for just nearly 3 years, working with the trust to sort of address inequalities that staff or our patients may face, and working with the trust to create ideas and initiatives of how we can tackle some of these inequalities that we have perhaps become more apparent this year and in recent times. But we thought it'd be a good opportunity to have this and do this mini podcast, really, Three Voices, to bring together our three perspectives and experiences, especially with everything that's happened this year, that's really put a focus on race and ethnicity. And certainly, as we are here in this month, it's Black History Month, but it also coincides with Freedom to Speak Up Month as well. So we thought it'd be a good opportunity to come together and do this mini podcast to conclude this really important month. So what we thought we'd start off with would be talking a bit about us thinking what Black History Month and Freedom Speak Up Month means to us from our own experiences and perspective, but also why it's important as well. So Beverly, if I come to you first, from your perspective around Black History Month and Freedom to Speak Up, why is it important?
Hi, so pretty big question. So when I think about Black History Month, it's around sharing lived experiences and the reality of those who aren't in positions of power and privilege, and to share insights during this time. Ideally, it would be better if we didn't have a Black History Month where we don't have to have an appointed time here. We'll talk. Nevertheless, we've got Black History Month, and it is important to me. It's a period of reflection where I think about all the things that have happened in the past, my family from the Caribbean, how they came over here, and the progress and the progress that has been made over the years around that. Education, health inequalities, a variety of different things, and policies and practice. So that's what I start to think about when I reflect on Black History Month. And what runs along with that for me around Freedom to Speak Up Month is around having a voice. And I believe that's so powerful. Having a voice is so powerful. And often my reality is that Black History Month, often people who identify as belonging to the Black community don't always feel they have a voice, don't feel that they are empowered. And so I'm passionate about Freedom to Speak Up Month, and I see that it's really aligned to Black History Month, where we're empowering people to have a voice. Within the system that we work in, I've recently undertaken some stakeholder engagement work, and what I have found there is a lot of our colleagues from the Black, Asian, minority ethnic community don't feel they have a voice. So we say, you have a voice, you're able to do this, but they don't feel empowered to be able to use their voice. And so Black History Month really focuses my mind on people having a voice, groups of people having a voice, everybody having a voice, and I align it to power and privilege, actually, because that's what it is, because those with a voice are the ones in power who have the privileges. So unpicking power and privilege, what that means, and how do we engender and support others to have a voice, to bring up challenges, and just to have an open discussion. So there's a lot to unpick, and that's what I want to share right now around my reflections.
Thank you, Beverly, and that's so true. Just thinking as well from my own perspective as chair of our staff network over the past few years, it's, you know, we've learned as well as we formed the staff network, as we came together, we realised that we weren't alone as individuals in terms of our experiences, and as you say, many of us felt that perhaps our voices were quieter and perhaps we didn't feel comfortable speaking up, but certainly with that staff network gave us that space and that safe environment to be able to speak up collectively, and we certainly have been supported a lot in this trust to do that, and to also help bring about change. But certainly for this month, Black History Month, is also about celebrating our history and contributions, and also celebrating the bravery in Black history as well. That's the thing, you know, I look back and reflect, actually there are many people in Black history who have spoken out when something wasn't right, when something wasn't fair, when it wasn't equal or equitable, and actually they did that, and what that brought about, that change, that positive action for the rest of us now years later, that we are now privileged to experience. So it does take bravery, it does take that Black history, those people that have spoken out and stood up for what was right. But certainly, as I said, we do a lot of that more in our staff network, and as I said, it's a safe environment that we've come together to be able to feel comfortable to speak out in this organisation, knowing that we will be supported, knowing that our voices can collectively be heard, because collectively we are powerful voices, and certainly this trust does embrace that fully. John, how about yourself? Oh, sorry, Beverly.
No, it's okay. I was just very quickly reflecting and just adding on to what you have just said, if I may, John. I'm just trying to make the link with the new work and the support of Jacqueline Davis's work within the Talents National Leadership Space and the People Plan. And one of those key themes around that is looking after our people. So how do we actually look after our people? And in this new world that we have talked about, Culvin, you've alluded to that, this space that we all find ourselves in, a space where we feel people feel anxious, bewildered, confused, being told it's business as usual, and many of us having to go to work with all what's going on in our own lives, in our own world, and being servant leaders. Around the People Plan, one of the key commitments is looking after our people. And so how do we look after our people? And again, this is where I see the power of the Freedom to Speak Up Guardians and the work of John in this space, and the work of staff networks as well.
No, definitely, Beverly. No, that's a really good point, and valuable that we need to think about that in organisations. How do we look after our staff and our people during this? John, from your experience and perspective, just around Black History Month and Freedom and to Speak Up Month as well, from your perspective, why is it so important that staff are given this opportunity and space to do that?
I think there's probably three brief reasons I would say why Black History Month and Speaking Up Month are absolutely vital. They're not added extras, they are essential to us developing the best care and the best culture for everyone. And I think the first reason is a very simple one, which is that we matter, people matter, human beings matter. And as Beverly had said, if people aren't given a space where their voice, their ideas, their hopes can emerge, then we have dehumanisation and depersonalisation. So this is all about creating human spaces where voices can be heard, understood, honoured, and as you said, Culvant, positive change can happen. So there's something fundamental to human beings about having those spaces where they can be heard and understood. Not just heard, but actually understood as well. So there's something to me about this work in Black History Month and in Speaking Up Month about how we create human services and humane services and cultures. I think the second thing is both Black History Month and Speaking Up Month challenge us all to listen to what we don't know or don't see, and also listen to those who we don't always hear. So I think there's a real invitation from both Black History Month and from Speaking Up Month for us all to develop listening hearts, to develop an openness to voices, stories, struggles and hopes of our colleagues across organisations. So there's something to me really important about seeking to hear those voices and not be defensive, but to enter into engagement and dialogue with those voices and to listen to create change in our organisations. And I think the last point is about history itself. And I think I was thinking this morning that often, when I was at school, history was always about the past. It was always about things that happened in the past. And that's obviously very, very true. But history is also about what we write every day. Everything we do, everything we say creates history. And Black History Month and Speaking Up Month is about trying to write a new history, a better history, and it's a history we write together. And I'd like to think this podcast is a mini little version of three people coming together, three voices, calling for that new history to be written and wanting that new history and making that commitment for that new history to occur. And it's very heartening in my own organisation, Leeds Community Healthcare Trust, to see things like the 10 BAME Speaking Up champions we have who do such quality work. And what I see there, and I know Culvant and Beverly see there, is new ground and new voices. We are seeking new ways of working. We are seeking to work across organisational silos and boundaries so these voices can be heard and new work and new change can emerge.
Thank you for that, John. And again, it's we've each touched on this as well. It's just the importance of this month in terms of the reflections of what it means for us and for people, but also organisations then taking this time and space to perhaps be reflective and think, actually, what more could they do to help build that inclusive culture in their organisations? What actions or things can they be mindful of actually to help support this even further? Staff speaking up, valuing staff from different ethnicities, ensuring that we're tackling health inequalities. Your perspectives, I'll come back to you, Beverly. What key sort of take-home actions or message would you give to organisations to help build this inclusive culture more?
It's a really good question, Culvant, and if I can think about that question deeply, what springs to mind immediately is the creation for organisations of psychological safe spaces, because there's something about feeling psychologically safe that can then enable others or people to feel they can speak up. So what can we do as a system, as a region, as an organisation to bring about safety of our colleagues, And so the work of the staff networks and the board or the sponsor of an organisation supporting an organisation to have a staff network, or supporting leaders who don't have a staff network and want to develop one, understanding the importance of staff who are minorities who really need a shared space. And others may say, well, why do you need a shared space when we all work within the same system? But actually, there's something about diversity and working closely with people as ourselves and sharing those experiences. Working in isolation isn't always a good thing. And when I say working in isolation, whilst we work in the bosom of the NHS family, we work in the bosom of the organisations that we work in. They are many times, having undertaken the stakeholder engagement study that I did recently, that BAME staff, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic staff, are the only ones in a department, are the only ones in a ward, are the only ones in an office. And there's a feeling of isolation there. So I would invite senior leaders who have the power, who have the privilege to make a change, who want to make a difference, who want to bring about cultural change, to consider creating safe spaces.
I completely agree with that, Beverly. And if anything, from my own experience and how our staff network has continued to function during, especially this past year and the pandemic and concerns, it would be for organisations to actively listen and collaboratively work with your staff, especially with those, as you talk about, those whose voices may not be heard as loudly as others. And that does require active engagement with staff networks or staff groups and nurturing any existing networks as well. From our perspective in Leeds Community Healthcare, our staff network moved to virtual meetings, and we moved to virtual weekly meetings, which were joined by our Chief Exec, Workforce Director, and by John, our Freedom to Speak Up Guardian. And it gave staff that space to talk and share their concerns or issues, but also get direct responses and actions back from the organisation, a commitment that they are being heard and that any concerns and actions are being taken forward. And those weekly sessions, feedback from staff, they're incredibly supportive, and found them really valuable, and really felt that it was created a culture that actually staff, it moved beyond just the pandemic, just beyond things to do with the pandemic or risk assessments. It featured other things around, such as creating the BAME Freedom to Speak Up champions, like John spoke about, to give more BAME staff the opportunity and space to speak up. But also it created initiatives like we're going to be starting our allyship programme in our trust soon, where we've got our white colleagues that want to engage and take part in a programme learning more about inequalities and white privilege and what they can do within their own privilege and their own positions to help tackle some of these inequalities. We had opportunity to speak at our AGM, having a focus on our staff network and around inequalities, as well as launching recently our campaign in our organisation titled I Can Be Me, because we want to help try and shift that perception and ensure that staff feel comfortable regardless of their background or ethnicity or other protected characteristics. They can bring their whole self into the workplace, and that individuality is embraced by everybody. So those are just some of the things, the impact our staff network has felt from some of the adaptations that have happened in this organisation. But it certainly did create that. It's creating that sense of culture and community in our organisation, where we are accepting of diverse staff and the communities we live in and serve, and certainly for people feeling comfortable to be themselves, and in return embracing that individuality.
Culvin, can I just add an additional reflection to the question that you asked?
Yeah, sure.
Me around what questions do. And so there's a really useful paradigm by Johnson and Scholes called the cultural paradigm. And the cultural paradigm has 6 rings, I think it is 5 or 6 rings, which identify certain areas. And if we to look at those and look at the culture and ask ourselves how we are doing around those areas, that is really useful. And also it's a useful tool or a framework to have a conversation, because it talks about myths, symbols. So as an organisation, we may say a certain thing, but if we look around that organisation, is that reflecting on how the board feel that we're doing, or to the colleague who is in the wards, in the office? So when we look at Johnson School's cultural paradigm, I always feel that's a really useful framework, and I'm sure that's a framework that the CQC inspectors tend to look at around culture and culture changes. So the framework by Johnson and Scholes cultural paradigm could be also serve as a useful starting point, perhaps, Colvin.
No, thank you, Beverly. I think that's a really useful reference, because I think in reality, organisations want to shift culture and want to change and create positive culture. But when you look at it of where to start, it is complex work. It's complex work, and it's difficult to know what initiatives or actions that are going to be meaningful, that can be taken, that's really going to help have an impact on culture. So I think that's a really good reference to add in there, Beverly, for organisations to have a look at. John, coming to you finally, just from your point of view as well to conclude, what more do you feel organisations can do to help build this more inclusive culture?
I think my one sort of call to action for the NHS and wider would be to have more of this. And I don't mean podcasts, although podcasts are very good things, but where people come together to tell stories, hear stories, create stories, share struggles, stand with each other. For me, that starts to create more human care, human connection, and human community at the heart of our organisations. And when that sort of stuff starts to happen, when that sort of stuff starts to show up, I think that's where real change really becomes possible.
Definitely, John. And again, it's just those key things. It's not going to be quick. It does take time, but I think the starting point is definitely for organisations to perhaps start engaging with their staff group, start engaging and having that sort of reflective look at their own culture and practice, to then start thinking what initiatives or what more could we be doing to help shift that. And it is a process, definitely, but certainly starting on that journey is really key and really important for everybody involved, staff and patient groups. I wish we had more time to talk, because this is a topic that I'm sure all three of us can add more and talk about. But as I said, this is a mini podcast we want to start with to help conclude a really important month that features two key things, I think, that are really important and coincide quite nicely together around Black History Month and Freedom to Speak Up Month as well. So thank you again very much, Beverly and John, for joining me on this podcast. And thank you, everybody who's out there listening, and I hope it's been useful. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.